Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another brand new episode of Because Cannabis every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, Thursdays on Spotify, and anywhere that you listen to your podcast, wherever you listen. Is podcast still a cool thing? Dustin Kava and B.C. Wehman. This is our podcast. It's about weed. Is podcasting cool anymore? That's the real thing.
I don't think that you can be anybody who's anybody and not have a podcast these days.
That does feel true. It's almost like getting lost in a sea of random voices. It's like being everybody wants like telepathy, right? The superpower. You can read other people's minds. You don't need that superpower. You just literally need to open up Spotify or your Apple apps, or not Google Play anymore, by the way. Google Play.
I know. Shut that shit down.
Dead on arrival. Not happening. It's not
that, don't they?
I think Amazon Music's trying to die too. They keep sending us messages. It's going to be down to Apple Podcasts and Spotify before we're done with it. But it feels like you're correct. You do not need to have that power. You can just turn on because everybody is talking about something. There is not anyone that has some form of either. You don't even need celebrity because people just talk and talk. It's amazing how many people just share their random openness thoughts and no one's listening. Some are listening. Some are listening, but it's impossible to listen to them all. And it's an interesting thing. I don't know where it's at. Maybe I'm having a midlife podcast crisis right now on the air as you're listening. Make sure you hit subscribe. You never know what's going to happen next. Do we survive? Do we rise from the ashes like the podcast phoenixes? I don't know. Follow us, subscribe. That's how you find out. It's an interesting thing, though, just getting on here every week talking about whatever you want to talk about, I suppose.
I follow so many on my Spotify that they stopped showing me all the ones. You know, like they only show me 6 out of the 30 or whatnot. So it
becomes like a social media feed where you don't get all of it. And then it starts to probably, and I'm sure this is happening, AI start to curate. And so you're just going to get a few of them. Probably the ones that pay for advertising are going to show up more than others inside your feed. And then it is true. You're going to miss a bunch because unless you scroll down to say, oh, what did this person say on their social media? Or what did this person say on their podcast? Unless you keep scrolling, like most folks, you're going to choose between the 3, 4, 5 right in front of you because they're all like probably just as good as what you might scroll down. Yeah. And then it becomes, you miss a lot. But then does this ever happen? Do you ever get to the point, and this happens all the time, both with me on a streaming, maybe nightly even, and on podcast, where I just scroll like there's nothing to watch or nothing to listen to, and it's just nothing I've seen. But I'm like, no. I will scroll through my list of podcast feeds like, not feeling it. I need that vibe. Too child murdery, true crime podcast. There's a limit. When it gets child murdery, tap out. Scroll. And they're all things I haven't listened to, but I'm like, nah. I'd rather just sit here and enjoy the act of scrolling and looking. That's the business model. We got to figure out, how do we monetize scrolling and looking?
We tried. I mean, I don't know. I think they love the idea of the effort. So it goes from like low effort pictures, and that's like, you can't just have a picture anymore. You need a video or a reel. And then it goes to creating all these reels, and then eventually
humans. That's what the AI algorithm says it loves these days: human faces and interactions. I just read that and literally just heard someone tell me that we need more humans. Do we? I feel like I need more software to mimic humans. You know what my favorite thing I saw today? We're going to get to some cannabis news and topics, but till then, thank you for listening to this little diatribe about podcasts. AI turning memes into video. And there is one circulating the internet now of the young girl giving the side eye to the house on fire. You know, that one there. She's looking at the camera. Massive house fire in the background kind of thing happening. Someone has turned that into a video to where children are all firefighters now, and they run up and they start talking to that girl, and it's all fake. But it looks there. You can tell because there's some transitional things. Is the kid, like, is the firefighter, real firefighter adult in the background is looking at the fire, turns and walks towards the point of view of the camera.
Man.
But it's pretty
pretty damn good. Like now, my kids, you know, like when they're 21, I can't even imagine they're going to be creating full-length movies that are fucking AI generated and be like, what? You can't make a movie? It takes fucking 32 seconds to generate a whole movie now. You know, it's like, I remember, you know, you think about the transition of the internet from like text static pages and web rings, and it took fucking 8 years to have like a search engine, and then it took another 10 years to have viable video over the internet, and then it took, you know, it's like you think about that 25-year progression, and AI is like, we'll do it in 6 months, you know, like it's it's nuts. It's nuts. I did read something about everyone bitches about crypto mining and how much electricity and inefficient it is, and now the big thing is it's taking small countries to generate this AI and electricity. Like they are
That's
the amount
crazy.
of electricity it takes for these machine learning models to actually learn is like, yeah, you could, it's Brazil or, you know, Russia and shit right now, like the amount of electricity. So it's nuts. It's nuts. I don't know what
It is nuts. I want to get to some weed stuff here in a second, but I got to show you something real quick here because it's something that I find is really interesting. What we were just talking about. If you look at what has happened just in the past year so far, like with AI and such, right there, and how it's come as far as like its actual video, you know. Take a look at this YouTube video here. Let me make this full screen for us real
Oh
quick.
my God, my son showed me this like 2 weeks ago.
Right. So just look at the difference on the top. If you're watching on YouTube, because you should have by now, you'll see YouTube creepily. I don't know why Will Smith has become the moniker of AI in eating, but you can tell the difference in what has happened between the top video here. If you're watching on YouTube, watching on Spotify video, it looks ridiculous. I mean, it's like horror movie-esque from what it was 1 year ago. And while still silly now, it has become like a legit thing, right? A legit thing where it looks pretty close. So that's in 1 year. Give it another 2 or 3 years, it's going to be doing all the work for you. And so I don't know. We'll see what happens, Dustin. I don't know if I'm on board or not yet.
Dude,
Both
I read
because
the
it makes
most incredible asshole article about AI video generators where the CEO was like, they were like, it's going to take a bunch of these creators' jobs. And he's like, well, they shouldn't have had a job to begin with. And I was just like, oh, fuck.
That's
like,
a good point. Is making stupid videos a real job?
yeah.
Like it became a real job, right? Like editing and making videos and recording little content and making little unnecessarily recaps of videos spoken in like should that be a job? Probably not. I mean, it could be. I guess if anything's a job, that could be. But it's interesting to note that it's right. Maybe it shouldn't have been a job in the first place. That kind of thing, right? I think that's the interesting thing to point out. I don't know. I don't know what's happening in the world with AI. AI, it's going to make a lot of folks' jobs easier, but probably not here where we are, Dustin, in the state of Ohio. Though, speaking of jobs, Ohio is probably about to have a lot more jobs than they had in the past. Here we're looking at, Dustin, we started this. We're 2 years in that we've done the Because Cannabis podcast on YouTube, on Spotify. Super illegal when we first started. Well, it was in medical in there, and then we've watched, talked, and debated about adult use, probably said it was never going to happen, have done multiple shows with Tim Johnson and more. When it happened, our shock, our surprise, it still hasn't officially happened yet, though it's more comfortable to consume in public, but we are on the precipice. It's the longest edges of edges that we have had in legal weed in a long time, but we are on the precipice. Provisional licenses are being issued out, which means once they get their certificate, they'll be for sale. So probably, and we're recording this whenever you're listening to it. This was recorded late July of 2024, just to put a reference to this. Probably by July 4th, July 3rd, next week, maybe this week, you're going to have legal sales in the state of Ohio. How you feeling about it?
You know,
you ready? You excited? Do you meh?
I don't know. I don't know. Imagine imagine getting a card and being allowed to drink lemonade, and all of a sudden 5-6 years later they're like, anybody can drink lemonade now, and it's like, well, I've been drinking lemonade for 5 years.
Yeah, that's the vibe, though. You can't be that guy. You can't be that guy because that is.
But it's not like getting a fucking card was that hard in Ohio. It wasn't like California where you stub your toe and you can get your card.
And it's super easy right now. Super easy.
And it's extremely easy right now. So it's like, and without the fees in Ohio and all this other stuff, it's like, what is this really? I mean, I see this more for tourists. I see this more for opening up the barriers to like where you can smoke, you know, more campgrounds being like cool with it, more like you know,
I
I
think
see that as opposed to like, I don't know, people off the street really needing this.
I think people off the street are just going to smoke it like they got it. Here's what happens, IMO. The medical connotation, even if you're deep into the world of weed and you start to realize that the medical has its purposes, and there are some people that very much use and enjoy and should consume cannabis kind of on a medical basis for some very specific symptoms. But we know, and I think a lot of folks know, medical does allow a lot of folks who even want to get it to use for adult use, or as some folks say, medicate without even knowing it. We want to give access. I think most people know that, hey, it's a bit of a, not a sham, but it's easy to get the card, as you just mentioned. I still think there are so many. I think we underestimate the amount of human beings and kind of their ability in a world where information comes at us very quick, and it's meant, much like podcasts, there's too much information to consume. And so you stop at headlines or you just hear cursory information. I see this every day working in dispensaries. Every single day, people come in to buy it and they don't know it.
What do you think creates more jobs? The hemp smoke shop industry hiring these people to sell their THCA and their fucking, you know, Delta 8s, or what the adult use is going to do? And then secondarily, I think what we don't really factor in is it's not about ease of access. It's about they're pissed off about having to give up their guns for a medical license.
That too.
So I think in this state particularly, that's the selling point of this adult use, is you can go in and buy it and no one's going to take away your guns in the process. And so
I think in general, I think it's more than the guns. I think it's just Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Seinfeld kind of being on the record, right? I think people, even because there's a lot of folks dealing with a lot of different medical conditions. And so even outside of the gun thing, like when you get in there, if you have a lot of Care Source or other type of Medicaid state things and you go through all these programs, you may not want the doctors to report through ORs that you're also buying cannabis. So I think it is, even it's a, you know, on top of the guns, I think it's just this not wanting to be known. I think though a lot of people hear medical and they just don't realize it. They don't get it. They don't understand it. And then now it's going to be public and they're going to have access to it. To the job front, I think clearly a legal program creates more jobs, because the jobs on a hemp shop selling D9 are just two dudes, you know, a couple of folks that are hired to work it and buy some stuff.
Fucking 30 shops per city. And so it's like
it's still a maximum of like 15. I mean, you only have 4 or 5 people per shop, maybe. So you're still maybe, 100 employees, but you're at 100 employees in one grow, in just one facility where you can grow it. As we talked about, you have to create jobs to grow it, jobs to process it, jobs to sell it. You have to make jobs. The more D9 companies that are made from anywhere, in-state or out of country, the same amount of employees still push it. So in order to, the one part about illegal cannabis is it does create a multitude of jobs, sometimes unnecessarily. Right? You don't always need all the jobs it makes, but it does create a lot of different jobs. But Ohio is kind of in that launch phase, Dustin, where they are issuing out what they call like the provisional licenses, kind of thing, where you go through and you can see like who's gotten these dispensaries. And if we look right now, 31 dispensaries in Ohio have received provisional licenses. And what's going to happen is the state will go through. There's a few more steps to quantify this information and get them their certificate. And once they do, they're able to sell. But here's the rub. And I don't know if people understand this fully. So what has to happen now is cultivators, and only 4 or 5 of the level 2 cultivators have actually passed their provisional yet. And so cultivators, and there's not that many that are even in the provisional stage. Of the 30-some, only 13 have actually gone through it. And processors, right? So there's going to be processors. No one's doing single use, so they're all dual use. So you can't sell products from companies that also haven't passed certificate of operations. So on top of being a slow rollout and confusing rollout, you could go to the store and only get access to one company's brand. And imagine on an accidental kind of branding impression equity thing, you walk into a store, the only company that's available is Standard Wellness. You buy it, you love it, you may never go back to anything else. And it was only
Loyalty
because
matters, man.
that was
Yeah.
the only guy that got there first to get it processed. I find that interesting
Well, we
as a
talk about
whole.
that loyalty, but you also, we've said it a lot before. People shop by price, people shop by, the convenience factor and stuff like that. So I'm I do think loyalty matters, but I think, at the end of the day, the minute that some of these other guys jump out and start pushing, but then again, I don't think they're going to discount these adult use
No, I tell
products
you,
for at least
they
a
aren't.
year or two. They're not going to need to. There's not going to be enough product to have to discount, and expiration dates coming up on this shit for at least a year. So, that's an interesting thing. You are close, and I am close to one of the 5 approved ones that are about to open soon in the next week or 2 or whatever the hell it is.
I'm curious though. I'm gonna watch from afar. I'm so comfortable with the small lines and ease to get in and out of a store right now that if you have a long line, man, I feel like some med people may get annoyed and get pushed back to the black market because they're there. But this happens all the time. Like what we're talking about is things we've seen it time and time again. Michigan did this 5 years ago, and now they're having the busiest sales they've ever had, right? The same stuff happens in every single state. So the other side of that is I try not to get my buds all in a bunch because it's going to work itself out. It's going to get crazy expensive. People are going to come on and rail. We'll probably come on this podcast and complain about prices. Let's check ourselves here. Let's understand it's going to get super high. Then they're going to come down. It's going to be slow. It's going to be product missing. It's going to be anger. Just buy it or don't, folks. I think that's where I'm at right now. Just buy it or don't. I don't care about your complaints.
Now, if I'm having a cookout on my backyard, I am going to fucking smoke a fatty, and my neighbor better not say a goddamn word.
I was 2 days ago, Dustin. I was outside of a public facility because you can't smoke like in these private facilities. But I was on public state property. But it was weird because I was in a group of folks and they were all consuming. But we're near a public like park trail, and there's like dads riding with their kids on bikes and like people playing beach volleyball next to me. And I'm like, it felt both weird because I did feel for the first time. I don't think I've ever sat in the stoner circle and been eyeball judged by like non-stoners. There's a bunch of these athletic beach volleyball folks, and we're talking like ripped and in like bikinis and Speedos, like playing beach volleyball on a Tuesday night. Like, good for you. Beach volleyball big in Cleveland. Who knew? And I'm just like, there's a lot of people. So it's a waft. It's like a cloud above us. I was like, oh my God, I'm in the stoner circle. Like, people think I'm a loser right now. And then I was like mad that they thought that. And then I just walked away and drove home and had a good time and said,
and you realize
if you judge me either way.
And you're not the one in the bikini in the middle of fucking downtown Cleveland or wherever the fuck.
If I had that bod, I would have, though. Maybe that's a problem. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Ohio's going to have its bumps. Don't freak out, people. Don't get mad. It's going to be that kind of thing. We know that. Now it's just trying to figure out how you're going to get through it, right? Go buy it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. You know, Dustin, that's like legal cannabis coming. One of our favorite stories. We even did a whole episode about the state of Oklahoma when it went illegal or when it went legal, when it launched its program. And we haven't checked in on the state in a while. You know, they were always the Wild West, the definition of it, because they had no rules, limited rules, no inspections, almost 1,000 licensees in the program. And everyone's like, I've never seen an inspector in years. Well, it took them some time, Dustin, but it feels like Oklahoma is checking on things. And I don't know if they're loving everything they're finding out.
Well, I mean, they call it the Wild West for, a reason. They're definitely, we talked about the idea of, mafia and organized crime coming in and being able to grow in Oklahoma and ship illegally outside the state to all their other, benefactors across the country. And we also talked about, grows with AK-47 guards at the door that don't speak any English. And, like in the middle of a suburban, development, at the end of it is this fucking, foreign grow with machine guns. And you're like, this is a little different. This is a little weird. But yeah, this is a big thing when they're finally starting to look into these licenses and visit a lot of them to be shutting down 15 grows a day of Chinese grows illegally. That's crazy. That means that at the end of this year, we're talking 600, 500 grows that they're going to be shutting down, just Chinese grows, let alone their other grows.
It seems like, and so if you're watching on
I
YouTube or
was wrong.
Spotify with video,
You ready for this number of how
yeah, go
many
ahead.
illegal grows? If they're shutting down 15 a day for a year, 5,475 grows they're going to shut down this year of just Chinese.
Yeah, so it seems like, and if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify with video, we have the article shared on screen here. It seems like what's happened is they're finally getting, and they have all these licensees. They still have some of the most, maybe still the most. I don't want to put that in record, but I believe so. The most licenses in any state's medical cannabis program, right? Because they gave out so many. And so these are all unlicensed ones, but they're finding it says up to 15 a day, kind of unlicensed, mostly run by Chinese. They've come over from Mexico and stuff into there, buying these houses up and just putting these houses up, putting up a fence, putting up a ton of air conditioning units, right? And just getting these vans and farming. And so it's interesting to find out. I never I guess I underestimate the amount of illegal action that happens. Not just people grow in a plant or two or just home grow, like illegal home grow is what I always think of, but this type of illegal grows where it's big budget, black market, putting out pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds a month, illegal grows hiding very plainly in a legal market, right?
And I wonder, if you think about if you think about what it used to have to be like, you used to need to go to your city, buy 16 houses, keep it, again, you're putting in all this equipment, you're trying to be low key about it. You're going to all these extra lengths to hide your electricity and all this shit. What these Chinese grows can do in a 4 or 6 month standpoint, when it's open and semi quasi legal, quasi gray, they can outproduce 100 of their trap houses that they were using to fucking grow in just a couple months. And so it doesn't take very long to see the benefit of going to Oklahoma, setting up operation with a 25,000 square foot grow or 50,000 square foot grow, and just running the course for 8 months. Got a couple migrant workers that are going to be kicked out of the state when you fucking shut it down, and move to the next one in Oklahoma. And so and now they're saying that the majority of East Coast black market, product is coming from Oklahoma right now. The majority.
I never would have pictured that. You never would have pictured that kind of coming from that area. Didn't you tell me a story recently that like where you were growing up as a kid, like all this like Canadian illegal bud came from there or something?
Yeah, they would pick fast growing suburban areas to set up their grow operations. So where I lived was one of the fastest growing counties in the East Coast. And so they would pick the first or second house on the new development where the houses are staggered far apart for the first 2 years, and set up their operation. And then they would fucking essentially give the house to the grower after 2 years or a year of growing in that place illegally, and then move on to the next one. And I remember right when I got out of high school, they finally came in and raided like say 25, 30 houses. They found the house that stashed all the money. They found all the subsequent like product stashing houses and like 25 grow houses. And it was this huge ordeal of like, oh my God, the mafiosa is coming in, the Canadian mafiosa.
Like, first of all, those two words have never struck fear in anyone. I'm just being honest. Nothing against Canada.
Probably the nicest mafia you've ever
we're so
stereotypical. But yeah, and so they don't even have to do that anymore. They just pop into, Oklahoma. No one's going to check them out for at least 2 years. Think of the, 2,000, 4,000 pounds you can grow in 2 years that are like in and out, baby, in and out.
Do you think, and I know that you can tell if you've been in a house of a former, we'll start with cigarette smokers or say a cat that has had some bathroom control problems. You can tell instantaneously upon walking in a house what past experiences have happened, like a mentalist kind of thing. Do you think after years and years, just the growing, and so essentially the terpenes and the oils and stuff that the plant is giving out, do you think that soaks into the walls and you could immediately tell a house, let's say abandoned for like a few months, not like abandoned, but just been empty on the market? Do you think you could walk in and be like weed's been not like grown? I feel like That's a lot of humidity, and that humidity is gonna, the walls, wood and plaster and stuff, so
Well,
it
it's
should
funny how
absorb it.
much you smell in a dispensary that has no opening of jars. Everything is completely sealed in
I've learned
like
bad packaging. Bad
bad.
packaging, bad sealing, bad seals and gaskets and stuff, and not keeping the terpenes in. That's what I have learned.
But you can easily smell it. You can smell it on the outside. And so I
You can smell
really
it on the
wonder,
outside.
yeah,
Oh, for
that's
sure.
like, I wonder, you're right about that. I really wonder if you'd be able to smell those terpenes. I say you gotta be, but then again, I don't know. I really don't know.
I would think you'd be able to smell it. How long do you think before Oklahoma, since weed is not cool in a lot of states, how long before Oklahoma becomes the psilocybin capital of the world, growing it there?
Oh my God. I think they've learned not to go Wild West with it. So I don't think it's
So
going to
they
be
just
as
keep it
quickly.
out west is where they're going to
Yeah,
go
I think so
with
for
that
now,
one.
for at least 10
So
years.
California, 1996, medicinal weed starts there. Obviously, sets off the rest of the medicinal cannabis programs across the country. 2018, they finally, after a few years of some other states getting past them, finally get into the adult use market quickly become within 2 years the biggest market in the entire country. And so I think they're bored, bro. I think they're bored right now. And so now they got to find, Huey Lewis said it. He wants a new drug. That's what California wants too. You're welcome. That's a good pull for me. That dude smokes weed, by the way. We should get him on the podcast.
Yeah.
He's doing the rounds, by the way. I've seen him. We can get Jim Belushi. We can get Huey Lewis. That's our new goal. Get Huey Lewis. If you know him, get him on the podcast because cannabis. So California, you're seeing the push.
I
We've
wish
had a
you could
couple.
do our news segment with us each week. Just a
Yeah, we
15
would. If we
minute.
could do Huey Lewis, if we could do, and now it's time for Huey Lewis with the news. Come on, bro. Not, right? If I could get Huey Lewis with the news and he could do one article a day for us, I feel like we'd have a win, and people above 50 would really love our show. So you're like, who the fuck is Huey Lewis? That's what you're saying right now. I can't help you. Google it, kids. So California getting a little, they need some new drugs. They're going. So we've seen the push. We've talked about it on past podcasts of psilocybin, MDMA, various kind of psychedelic leaning tendency type drugs being used for medicinal treatments, some therapeutic treatments, ayahuasca, chain smokers, meth addicts done after a session or two of these guided sessions. And so we saw a couple counties have in Washington and a few areas have begun to decriminalize possession, which is usually where legalization efforts begin to start. And so now you're seeing, starting with some of, veterans, first responders, PTSD, which is a very common thing. There's a new Senate bill in California, Heal Our Heroes Act, that has been put out there. And so just in general, Dustin, we've had people's thoughts on how psilocybin, how mushrooms and other psychedelics, it's not like cannabis market. We know that. We don't need to go down that path. It's a different type of thing. But do you feel this is a good step, this moving forward with access for PTSD and veterans and such?
I don't know, but my favorite line in this whole thing is to be administered under medical supervision. Could you imagine fucking tripping and having the doctor there like taking notes, staring at you?
Oh yeah,
while you
yeah. So what
fucking
needs
do
to
this?
happen? And I may or may not have been to a psilocybin type session, guided session before. Usually, and maybe this is maybe not. I don't know. My only experience is very low key. Couches, like it looks like a place you'd want to chill at, right? Almost too stereotypical chill, but it was a relaxed room. Like even if you go to a psychiatrist, right, and you got a couple couches and they got some knickknacks on the walls, I could do it there. I would not want to be in like a hospital lab, like on a hospital bed with stark white lighting and like interns or residents coming by with clipboards and being like, "Oh, he is smiling intensely right now," and I'm like, "I am. Your light, your face is melting." Yeah, I don't want that happening
No way.
there. So it feels like it's a good idea, but I think I'd need to your point, quantify what medical supervision meant in that area.
Yeah, man. And I've also seen, yes, I think that's definitely something to think about. I also wonder when, is everybody in cannabis keeps talking about, how this is the next stage of shit. And I, I feel like we've been still idiots with medical weed. And so like, do I really think we're going to do this right? Do I think, is this just another 280E fucking, push to find another fucking substance that they can run 280E and have no no recourse for taxing them in the way they do, and it's just going to be another non-profitable industry that everybody thinks is the new hip thing to get into, or is it something else? I'm still not quite sure why it's cannabis guys who are really pushing a lot of this type of conversation.
I think it's the realization to be the early adopter in the next legal drug. I feel like that's where it starts. This one seems like it's on a Senate level, kind of on a more politician level. I'm sure there's lobbyists involved in this, and there's things we don't know where these folks get them. But it is interesting that it's just two things. And if we're going to get a bit political, it is interesting that it is a couple different Republicans that are calling for this, which makes me feel like there's some, and it's very vet centric, which you also don't get.
Yep.
In some areas. So it's interesting. And what they're doing here in this particular Senate bill is really focusing heavily on getting this treatment specifically for veterans and first responders. That feels like the right step, right? That feels like a nice thing. It feels like it could be good. It probably, I think we've seen this could have positive results. I think the key to this, and this would be a lot depending on who our biggest leadership is, who the president is and how the country is leaning on a political level. And I don't think a Trump administration would be interested in this at all. I feel Biden is too old in that genre to get it. I think you would need a younger, hipper, an Obama-like president, a Clinton-like president. So someone who's obviously left-leaning and someone who's just a little younger, who's grown up through the DARE programs and then realized that it's not as big. And yeah, you shouldn't do heroin, but there's a big difference between heroin and weed, right? And so what would be amazing, pipe dream, is that on a federal level, someone realizes what has happened the last 20 going on 30 years in legal cannabis and the disaster it's been, how we could quickly, with some easy rescheduling and decriminalization, you don't necessarily need to make it legal, right? Because then you can just let folks do what they do, right? And so some quick decriminalization on some of these particular substances, and then let it go, right? So it doesn't fall under 280, like solve the problem before on a federal level, so it doesn't turn into another 30 years of because psychedelics live on YouTube every Thursday is probably where we'll have to put that show.
God damn it. Listen, I am no one to shun away from psychedelics. I see the benefit. I've seen them help me in certain regards, but damn it, do I hate the culture. Do I fucking despise the fucking culture. And so oh my God, please no, because
here's the real question. How much are you starting to hate weed culture? Oh, that's another show. We'll save that for another show, folks. But sometimes it can be a bit much. It is nice though. What is nice about kind of public acceptance, what is nice about legalization in other areas is it does make some silly things feel like, okay, we can get rid of some of these sillier things. And it's nice. You've seen, I remember being here in Ohio, a Cleveland Browns fan, watching Josh Gordon, a very talented wide receiver, basically not be able to play his career because he would pop for weed and then get busted and then got basically kicked out of the league from playing. And that's happened to more than a few players. And we've seen in the last few years, especially on a professional level, starting in basketball, because so many of them were smoking weed, and they said just making it legal, not testing for it, right? They'll test for steroids and they just smoke your weed, right? And then we've seen MLB do it. And now, Dustin, and as pros kind of go, I think the pro stocked pond system, which is college athletics, which is the wrong we're in the wrong network if you want to debate that, happens. They have to make those following moves. So as money and pay with the NIL licensees has hit college sports, so would the eventual ban on cannabis usage. I think it's interesting though. It's not all college athletics or like the NCAA is banning it. Basically, here's what I learned. If you're really good and you can make it to the finals, smoke weed. If you're kind of subpar, don't. So cannabis products are no longer going to be a banned drug, according to this article, for Division I athletes and championships. Saying so sometimes before you head to this, NCAA, March Madness and you get to the brackets, you could undergo drug testing. Right there, it has a program for steroids, hormones, masking agents. And during the championship time, right? So that's part of the standard. It tests for additional narcotics, stimulants, and recreational drugs. And that point, cannabis has always been on that illegal thing. You know, we saw a recent article a couple years ago, right, where Sha'Carri Richardson was kicked off the Olympics team because she smoked a little ganja, which felt super silly. It's not going to help her run faster, right?
And
she's
even
not
that's
on
what
it
they're
that day.
saying
She's not
here.
like right before the race. She's like training off time, recovering with little CBD, THC, and then she's going to fly over to, and she didn't do even a Brittany Griner, who is in another country where it's illegal. Like Sha'Carri Richardson was just chilling in like off season. And they're like, oh, now you can't you can't run for the Olympics because you smoked weed one time, you know, for
One
that.
of my
She did get
favorite
on to
things
the next
is
Olympics,
they're
but
finally saying like there is no competitive advantage.
That's the
for
key,
smoking
yes.
weed, and it's like, yeah, no shit,
No.
motherfucker. Like, you idiots, you knew this all along. Like, yeah, that guy who just smoked that joint before the game, he's yeah, he's definitely.
it feels like an
one up
SNL
on
skit
him.
or something like that, like having this stoner like set up, and then all of a sudden, you know, they're all at the line and they're in their, you know, their starting position, right? And they got their feet in those things and those funky shoes, and dude just like, I'll get there in a second. And instead of like being in his like kind of start, the gun pops and he's like, hold on. And then dun dun dun, you know, Chariots of Fire music comes on, and he slow-mos past him while he's still exhaling, by the way, because it has to happen. You got to finish these things in 10 seconds, right? A 100-meter dash that Sha'Carri Richardson runs. So he's like, and literally the smoke is just coming out his mouth, and he's probably like, as he kind of rolling by. Yeah, it does have, and I think we can say this, and I don't think anyone would argue, it probably has some therapeutic recovery benefits, obviously, on that, but it doesn't have in the moment. Yeah.
Yes.
It's an after, it's a before. No one, and even the players on the court, I don't think those NBA players were, you know, rocking it out of the park. It's not about that, right? It's just, and like we've talked, it's a little bit of a thing. So it's nice to see that slow relaxation. Do you think we're going to be in a spot in like 10 years from now where it's just a thing like alcohol? Like exactly.
Yeah.
At the pace that we move, we think about and I know that you said, well, 10 years, like it's taken us 30 years is a long time to get to where we're at. But in the pace that the society moves as a whole, it's interesting to say in 10 years from now, at the rapid rate that we're moving.
When you have a framework to make the right arguments that worked before, you can reword the argument for the new framework, you know, for the new thing you're trying. So we've seen successful arguments happen all over the place. And so, yes, I do think that it's going to get harder and harder to argue against it as these, you know, what worked is continuing to work. So,
and you just, sometimes you have to turn the messaging on its head, right? You have to turn the messaging on its head. So sometimes it's about A, thinking of a catchy rhyme, because that's magic right there. And B, finding a way to, put a little positive spin, a little positive light on the cannabis marketplace. So Illinois here doing a great little blood drive. Love the catchphrase, bleed for weed. Fantastic, by the way. Way to own the weed word there. So there is, look, they need blood. People want weed. It feels like a great combination to go together. So we have the Rock River Valley Blood Center here in Life Cannabis Dispensary got together, and they're going to launch up. Do a blood drive. You're going to get yourself a little bit of a cannabis Rhythm. Look at Rhythm. Rhythm getting a little advertising in there. Decent brand Rhythm. I've had Rhythm here in Ohio. So you're either going to get a eighth or 100 milligram Incredible Bar. That's pretty good, right? A free eighth or a free 100 milligram. You're looking at about a $30, $40 value. And if you're first 50, bro, free t-shirt. I bleed for weed. Come on. That kind of thing.
Way better than the Red Cross commemorative cup that you normally get. I'd rather walk away with a fucking eighth. And
here's the question. How busy do you think it will be? That's my real question. Like, is it going to be insanely crazy busy? Are they going to run out of weed? Do you think people lined up for it? Do you think it brings out more folks that wouldn't have donated blood initially? Which is probably.
Yeah.
That's the win, right? More folks who wouldn't have donated blood. Now, here's the question. Do they reject the blood because it has weed in it?
I know. That's exactly. That would be even more funny. Like, Yeah, I truly don't know. I mean, I it's all for nothing. It's just the greatest marketing campaign of all for yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you never know what's for nothing. Hey, this wasn't for nothing. Lots of great news, lots of great articles covered today. We appreciate you joining us on the Because Cannabis podcast. Brand new episodes every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, Thursdays on Spotify with video, and anywhere that you listen to audio podcasts. Give us a subscribe, give us a follow. We would definitely appreciate it. Help us spread the word of Wayward Media, of Because Cannabis out into the masses socially. At Meet WM, of course. Great guests coming on and such. Give us a comment below. What kind of news stuff do you want to see? Give us some stuff that's happening in your town. We'll make fun of your town, maybe you as well. Thank you guys for joining us for the show. I'm feeling a little saucy right now. I need to get my psychedelic treatment for that. Till then, next time, see you guys later.
Appreciate you guys.